Hi everyone, welcome to the Eugene Green Home Tour. I'm Laura Allen. Before we get started, I want to introduce Evie Hernandez, one of the interpreters. She is going to tell you how to access this bilingual event. Thank you, Evie. Now I want to introduce the rest of the team. Eloise Navarro from 350 Eugene will be doing technical support and Q&A. In the Spanish channel, we have Lindsay Franger, who's also doing technical support, and two awesome interpreters, Evie Hernandez and Kayla Almazan. The tour videos that you're going to see were shot and edited by Paul Rivers and Jordan Romani from Fresh Pack Studio. They're an amazing team, so if you're looking for any video editing project support, I highly recommend you contact them. Please note that playing videos takes a lot of bandwidth, and so depending on your internet speed, you may experience different qualities of viewing, and also know that all of these will be posted on our website after the event. I want to thank our partners on this tour: Fossil Free Eugene, Beyond Toxics, Bring, Electrify Now, the Eugene Sustainability Commission, Puerto de la Familia, Organic Roots Eco Firm, Arcimoto, Sierra Club Many Rivers Group, and the Emerald Valley Electrical Vehicle Association. And a big thanks to 350 Eugene for sponsoring this event. So today we're going to be touring 7 homes and gardens, and we'll also be having 3 expert talks. We're going to hear from Ann Turner from Physicians for Social Responsibility. She'll talk about the health impacts from cooking on gas in your homes. We'll hear from Vince McClellan from Energy Design. He'll tell us about solar energy options for the home and financing. And we'll hear from Phil Barnhart from the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association. He's going to talk about having an electric car and also financial rebates. This event will be recorded and posted in a few days. Check eugenegreenhomes.org. So anytime you're making a change to your home, you're having a direct impact on the future. Our homes can either help create a more livable, stable climate, or they can contribute to the climate crisis. And before we see the sites, I want to explain a little bit about what I mean by a green home. Climate change is here, and in the Eugene area, we're going to experience more heat waves, more fire, more smoke, and more drought. And in this tour, we're going to be focusing on the things we can do to both adapt to the climate change, things we're going to encounter, as well as reverse the climate crisis. So a green home is one that keeps us safe and healthy during heat waves and smoke. It's powered by clean, renewable energy. It conserves water. It doesn't pollute the air or the water. It uses non-toxic and sustainably harvested materials. It reduces, recycles, and composts, and it's healthy for people and the planet. We can have beautiful, comfortable homes that also align with our values of protecting people and the planet. And I want to talk a little bit about what is often called natural gas, because this is a fossil fuel that's very common in our homes. Natural gas is also called fossil gas. It's also called fracked gas because most of it comes from hydraulic fracking, or methane gas because most of it is methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. In Eugene, 37% of all the fossil fuels used in our community is this methane gas. In fact, 85% of Eugene's local emissions come from transportation fuels and using gas. So getting gas out of our homes, as well as electrifying our vehicles, will have a very significant impact in reducing climate change, reducing carbon emissions. And it's also notable that this natural gas pollutes at every stage in its production. It pollutes from the gas wells to the pipelines to the pilot lights and then in our homes. I'm sure that you're aware that fossil fuel companies have been bad actors in the climate crisis, and they still are. Our local fossil fuel company, Northwest Natural, right now is suing the state of Oregon to avoid reducing their greenhouse gas emissions through the state's climate protection program. They're trying to stop this new state program that is designed to reduce the state's greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2035. And at the same time, Northwest Natural is pushing to expand their system and add new customers and use more of this methane gas. Gas is also getting more expensive. Northwest Natural got a 13% rate increase last year, and they're now asking for an additional 12% rate increase to fund shareholder profit, executive bonuses, and pro-gas advertising, like promoting what's so-called renewable natural gas. And this, I want to mention that this is a false solution because we don't have enough potential of this so-called renewable natural gas. There's just not nearly enough to cover the current use of gas in Oregon. It's also going to be very expensive, and it still makes pollution. It also comes from problematic sources like landfills and feedlots, things that we should be trying to reduce the amount of methane coming off of, not increasing it. On the other hand, the electricity in the Eugene area is very clean. EWEB, the electricity provider, has some of the cleanest electricity around at nearly 90% carbon-free, and there are places that have 100% carbon-free power. 90% is pretty good. If anyone's wondering if there's going to be enough of this clean electricity to go around, EWEB has recently completed a study on the impacts of electrification on their supply, and they have found that yes, there is enough in the near term, and they will be planning for the future to make sure there is enough in the long term as well. Electric cars are particularly beneficial in this area because they can be charged at night when there is not as much demand for electricity and when there's still a lot of the clean hydropower that is produced continuously. One of the themes in this tour is something called home electrification. And what this means is just getting fossil fuels out of our homes and replacing them with high efficiency electric options powered by clean renewable energy. All of these technologies currently exist. They're currently being used. They are getting better and they're getting more affordable. If you want to learn more about any of this, you can visit our website, eugenegreenhomes.org. And I want to briefly mention a myth promoted by the gas industry around resiliency. Is it less resilient to cut out gas? Is it a problem to rely on just one source of power, electricity? Is it a problem for times of disaster, power outages? And the answer is no. Modern gas appliances like gas furnaces, though they burn gas, they require electricity to operate. They require electricity to push the warm air through the home. So if there's no electricity, there's also no heat. For cooking, that's a little bit different because cooking requires emergency preparedness for all homes. And that can be something like having easy to prepare foods, having a simple camping stove as a backup. It doesn't mean that we need to have gas coming to our homes every day to be prepared for disaster. Also, our communities need a community-wide support for these times of need, like warming shelters and cooling shelters for extreme weather or power outages. In the future, we're going to see more opportunities for home batteries or even using electric car batteries to charge the home and offer emergency power. Right now, these options are not readily available to most people, but hopefully they will be in the future. I want to take a moment to mention some of the technologies you'll be hearing about in the tour. Heat pumps are a big one. If you are familiar with a refrigerator, it's kind of a similar, it's a different technology, but it is similar in the sense that a refrigerator uses electricity to cool the inside of your refrigerator. A heat pump does a similar thing. It is moving heat, transferring heat using electricity. It can either make warm air or warm heat in one place or cool. So they can function as both a heater and an air conditioner. And they're very efficient. It's much more efficient to transfer heat than to generate heat. Heat pumps can replace gas furnaces, electric heaters, air conditioners, hot water heaters, and dryers. A lot of homes have these whole house heating and cooling systems. So the heat pump is heating the entire house as well as being an air conditioner for the entire house during the hot season. There's two types, ductless and ducted. A ducted system, if you're familiar with like a gas furnace, there's a furnace or a boiler, it's moving hot air through the home, there's air ducts, and there's vents in different rooms to have the warm air come out. A heat pump system would be the same, just instead of having the gas furnace, it would be a heat pump that's generating this warm air or cool air to run through the house. The other common type is called a ductless or a mini split. And with this one, there are no ducts or no vents going through the house. There are these pieces called a head, They can be located in different rooms, and that's where the warm or cool air comes out. And you're going to see these in a lot of the homes on the tour today. There's also heat pump water heaters, and these look like a conventional water heater, just the mechanism to heating the water is more efficient because it's using heat pump technology. And heat pump dryers, the same thing. These are more efficient, they use electricity, and they dry the clothes. And you'll see one of these on the tour today. And lastly, there's a technology called induction cooking. And this is a very efficient form of electric cooking. It's also very responsive and very popular with chefs who are embracing this and people who like to cook. You'll get to see these. And how it works is instead of making resistance heat and heating something that then heats the pan that then cooks the food, this creates a magnetic field that directly heats the pan itself. And that is a more efficient way to do it. It's also safer because the top of the stove doesn't get hot. So with that, we are going to get started to see our first site. This is the home of Beth and Tim, and they live in the historic Springfield district.
What makes the most sense to set up the first energy efficient thing that you can do? Where's that first domino that's going to make the biggest impact? And then where's the next, and where's the next, and where's the next?
Hi, my name is Beth.
And I'm Tim.
And welcome to the WM Longhouse in Springfield. We've lived here for about 7 years, and we're so excited to show you around.
So I am a therapist at Looking Glass Community Mental Health. I love the work they do.
I'm a senior research engineer. I deal with kind of a human-computer interaction and trying to understand how people use devices.
We have 2 amazing kids. They are 13 and 12. I think what originally drew us to this house was just how beautiful it is. All the built-ins, all the original pieces were just really fun. It's a 1924 house, which means it's got a lot of projects that need to be done. We are people who really care about the environment, and it was taking a project one at a time. When we moved in, we just had all the projects, and so we had to slowly start prioritizing things really as they broke. When it came time to replace the appliances in the kitchen, we would have loved to have done a lot of things, but with our limited space, we definitely were like, well, we can do an induction stovetop, and we can do a convection oven and a convection microwave to kind of improve our cooking time and reduce the amount of time that we need.
Originally, the house had gas. In fact, there's still a gas connection at the back, and I like to cook a lot. I'd heard cooking with gas was great, and I did enjoy it a lot, and it was a really, really good system to cook with. So I was a little nervous moving to induction, but I couldn't be happier. Boiling water is so much faster now. Getting any of the food up to temperature quickly is much easier on an induction stove, and it is incredibly easy to clean. I was a little worried about the all glass top, but it's like cleaning a window instead of lifting the top and getting all the bits of food that are down around the inside with the gas heat. So it's been great for us, and I've had no regrets.
So yeah, when our washer and dryer finally went out, it was an exciting pandemic. It was summer 2020, and our washing machine just sounded like it was lifting off into space.
We had to work from home. It's bad for meetings.
It was rough, so it was fun to kind of take a look at what do we replace this with. We took a look at Kelly's appliances because they're a local company. We try to do local as much as we can. One
of the things I started looking into was a heat pump or ventless dryer. The initial reviews I read kind of made us hesitate. They were talking about how it takes much longer to dry. But then I started looking into it a little bit more, and it's much gentler on the clothes, and it uses substantially less heat. So this is our heat pump dryer. It's a great thing. It has this little water reservoir that pulls out the water for you, and you can use it for other things later. It has heat pump technology, so you see here, this is all the venting system. This is where all of the air comes in and goes out. So this was previously the duct or the air vent for our previous electric dryer, and now we have it's just stuffed up, to reduce the amount of heat being lost through that.
So when we finally made the push to let's do this solar panel thing, let's do it as soon as possible, and let's not delay it, I think what really prompted us to kind of take a look was just kind of sitting at home during the pandemic, having these natural disasters happen, and just go, oh, we feel so powerless. So let's just do it. There are some great energy federal tax credits, and Oregon had just renewed its tax credit, which really helped.
That helped.
And I have to say, I just feel so much better every day, don't you?
Yeah. I have an app. I'm a little of a tech geek. I have an app that shows, power consumption and power generation. It's awesome. This month,
Yes.
we were net neutral. In fact, we put more back into the grid than we took out of it, so that was good. And it's only March or April.
April. When we bought this house, it had a lot of grass all the way around and plants that were kind of neato, but not great for the local native area. And so we've just slowly but surely been pulling all of the grass out and putting plants in that are good for bees and butterflies. And we just took out a whole section of grass and put in a pollinator's garden. We went out to Doak's Nursery, which is a native plant nursery, and got a bunch of plants that are great for your pollinators.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they're really nice, but most importantly, they're going to be really great. You need to water them a lot the first year, but then after that, they're pretty self-sustaining, so they are much more drought resistant. And we just get a chance to have something that's going to be beneficial for the local environment and something that's lovely to look at. I think just giving yourself kindness too for doing what you can in small ways when you can afford it, and then looking for those energy tax credits. Sitting down with Vince at Solar Energy Design really helped us figure out what we could do and what the tax credits would be, and just that consultation made us go, oh, this is doable.
The big lessons learned were anticipate the heating system break, and if you have a gas heating system, get ready. Get ready for the heat pump sooner than later. And two is insulation. Yeah. It's surprising how little insulation these old houses have if they haven't been converted at all.
Mm-hmm. So. Thanks for coming and being a part of our community. We're so glad to invite you into our home.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
To see it and appreciate it. But we are finally getting our stucco redone this year, and we're going to insulate it. It's going to be insulated and wrapped, and it'll really help our heat and energy usage. So I remember going to an eWeb webinar, eWeb presentation that 350 put on recently, and they were just talking about the insulation is the best thing that we can do. So we feel kind of like pleased that we're going to be able to do that, even though it's not super exciting from a standing outside looking at your home kind of perspective. It'll be neat. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We do have one question in the Q&A, but Laura, maybe we can circle back at the end if you want to get to the next video.
Is asking about if you have a battery with your system.
We don't. The design at the time, the space we had on our roof, it wasn't going to produce enough power to meet 100% of our needs, especially with an electric vehicle. So we decided to go without ones. We're just pushing back into the grid the energy we use during the day.
And I think it was great.
Energy we produce during the day, which is a lot this last week. That's been amazing.
And Vince at Energy Design, when we were talking about the pros and cons, he really talked us through the reasons to get a battery. And if you are off grid, for instance, it's an excellent idea. Or if you have the ability to store a lot of that, it's great. However, for us, when we were, again, doing that individual consultation about our particular grid and what capture we're going to get, it was like we weren't going to need the battery often enough to make the expense worth it yet. But we could add it in later. And we probably will, maybe a decade down the road. So appreciate that question.
Great. Thank you both so much for being part of the tour and for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all for being here, and thanks for doing this. This is really neat. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go to our next site. We're going to meet Tomoko, who lives in Eugene.
To make my house as energy efficient as I can. It's also very simple, has a light carbon footprint, it's enjoyable, and it's a happy place to be. Hi, my name is Tomoko Sekiguchi. Welcome to my humble home. I've lived here for 36 years, and there are things and processes that are a little unconventional. And so I wanted to show you what those were. When I first got the house, it was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house with an attached garage. It was built in 1948, and it was not very energy efficient. And so we put in new windows, double pane windows. We put a lot of insulation in the attic and in the floors. In the first big remodel of the house, we converted the garage into a kitchen dining room with a bedroom above. Then many years later, to increase density, we split the house into 2 units, one for me and the other is the apartment. The forced air system was removed and I replaced it with a ductless heat pump and radiant floors. This is the heat pump water heater. It's very energy efficient. It's very inexpensive to run. Instead of running a pipe from my hot water heater all the way, a long distance to this other kitchen, what I'm using is this small hot water heater that the line is right by the sink, and so it doesn't lose so much heat in the pipes. And so that's another more efficient strategy. With the porch, what I did is I used salvaged wood, and so I had to go pretty far and wide to find it. But you can see the nail holes that are still showing, and I like to show off that kind of thing too, so that you can see that it is old wood. And also, it provides a lot of shading, and I think that's really important in the summertime because when you've got shade, then the whole house is cooler. It's a good way to reduce your energy gains. I really love cooking with gas, but I also knew that it was really bad for the environment, and the stove quit working. Of course, I couldn't buy a new gas stove, and so I got this induction cooktop. And I've really learned to love it because it turns off and on really quickly, just like a gas burner, and it hits the right temperatures so quickly. There's the Tadillac, there's the clay plaster walls, there's salvaged wood again that I used. I also got a tub off of Craigslist, so a used item is always better for the environment, for the waste system. So probably the most interesting thing is this shower wall, and it is made of something called Tadillac. And it is a wall that's made out of lime plaster. Typically, if you got lime plaster wet, it would take on water. It would absorb it. But what happens is that at the final stages of when it's drying, you take a stone and you burnish the surface until it's extremely smooth. And then afterward, you paint it with a black olive soap, and a chemical reaction happens and it becomes waterproof. Also, I have a bidet system, and I like using that because, one, it feels cleaner to me, but also, in the time of COVID, there was a big run to the grocery store for toilet paper, and I didn't have to deal with that, so that was pretty nice. In the end, there's water in the tub, so I use that to bucket flush the toilets. The reason why I do that because, flushing the toilet with bucket water is just a drop in the bucket. It's an important thing for me to do because it reminds me that, yes, our resources are important and we should use it very sparingly and wisely. In the front, I've decided to make it into a food forest. And so I've only just started, so the plants have not grown up. They're these little twigs that are sticking up that will someday be trees. We'll walk around to the side of the house and through to the bike shed. And I just wanted to talk about bicycling as one of the top climate solutions for an individual. And I help organize and volunteer with a group called Climate Revolutions by Bike, and we're interested in advocating for bicycling and to get more bicycles than cars on the road. It's a 3,000-gallon rainwater catchment tank, and it's probably enough water to water my garden 50 times. And so I'm thinking that in the summertime, if there's an emergency or a crisis where we can't have access to water anymore, I can continue to grow my garden. The backyard is for more of a conventional garden where I'll plant tomatoes and peppers and lettuce and things like that. And then I put in a pizza oven. Its sustainability feature is community building, and community building through pizza gatherings. For me, it's not about living the status quo life of the past 50 years. There's an elegance to living simply and well, and I feel like less is more.
So that was Tomoko's site. And I realized that you all probably need a moment to think about questions because each video really has a lot packed into it about what these amazing things people are doing in their homes. So if you want to write your questions in, that would be great. And thank you, Tomoko, for joining us. I know you're out of town, so I really appreciate you coming virtually to the event.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Can I just say a few things about my place before we start? The question and answers. Sure. Well, so I wanted to say that I'm just so glad that you're doing this. To promote electrification. But also, I wanted to say that the precursor to any energy use is reduction, of course. And although this may take a little extra time or changes in the way we do things, I'd say that small changes make a big difference. And so it's about trying to do more with less, as I said before. And it's nice to see that finesse rather than technological force can be effective. And so, so instead of things so much, I like to try to work with strategies. And that's what I hope you saw in my house. But for instance, line drying of clothes, like you were talking about dryers. I like line drying my clothes rather than using a dryer. I don't have one. And for temperature control, I use night flush of mass for cooling in the summer, and I wear extra clothes in the wintertime. And curtains for keeping heat in is effective for my radiant floor system. And also that point of use water heater does make a big difference in, how much heat is lost in the pipelines to get to the point where you're using it. And okay, sorry, one more thing, and then a simple solution to the pans that don't work with the induction system, with the induction stove, is that I use a bicycle disc brake. And I put that on top, and then I can put my little pots or the things that don't work, the pots that don't work for induction will work with the metal plate on it. So
Great. Okay. There are some specific questions, Eloise.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Tomoko.
Yeah, awesome. We've got lots of questions, so we might not be able to get to them all.
Okay.
The first one I was able to see if you could just talk a little bit more about the food forest, maybe what the process for, picking the plants that would go there, what that all looked like.
Well, I'm just starting that, so I'm not an expert on that, but I'm just using the things that I like most. And the main thing is just to get rid of, a lot of the things that didn't feed me. And so, let's see, aronia berries and, unusual kind of more native or plants that are unusual or what I've chosen for my garden.
Awesome. And then if we've got time for maybe one more, just got one about how you use the water in the storage tank, just gravity fed or something else.
Right now it's gravity fed. It probably needs to have a little solar pump on it, but for the garden, it does just fine for using gravity only. And someday what I'd like to do is drink that rainwater. I have a Berkey carbon filter system, and I'm going to use I haven't tried it yet, but I guess I need to test the water first. But that's my plan, is to use it for drinking as well in the case of an emergency. Plus, I think it'd be just fun to drink rainwater.
Awesome. And then let's see, there's one more specific question before we get on to the next video was, is there a smell from the old tub water and the bucket in the bathroom?
Okay, no, because I wash outside of the bath. I only soak in the tub water, so it's not dirty water. So it's basically clean. I'm washing outside and just soaking, and so yeah, there's no, and so it lasts a long time. In maybe 2 or 3 days, it's still not stinky.
Awesome.
Tomoko. And if people like Tomoko, if you could answer, I know the questions are kind of going in the chat and the Q&A. So if people are able to put them in the Q&A, that would help Eloise navigate and find them quicker. But also if they're in the chat, Tomoko, if you wouldn't mind just direct writing to people or to everyone so everyone sees the answers, that would be great too. Because I know each section is very short, so we aren't going to get to answer all the questions.
Okay, well, on the Q&A, I think I've answered those. If I haven't, then please ask again.
Great, yeah, and if you had a question in the if you have a question that's not answered and want to put it in the chat, Tomoko can respond to it there. Great, thank you. So we're going to go to our first presenter, Ann Turner, and let's see, I'm going to share my screen because I have all the slides up. And so Eloise, is Ann ready to go? Okay, so Ann Turner is a retired physician. She has a long career in the medical world, and now she's a volunteer with the Physicians for Responsibility.
So I I worked in a community health center for almost my entire career, and I really came to working on climate issues after seeing that this seems really to be the biggest health issue that we have worldwide. So because I worked in a community health center, I also realized, kind of firsthand how much this has to do with environmental justice, and how communities who are low income and minority communities are so disproportionately impacted by climate change.
Okay. So I think the slides are working now, I believe. Okay. So if you want to jump in.
Sure. So thanks for being here. And I'll talk about the harms of gas in your home, and particularly from gas stoves, and also the benefits of electrification, which you've seen a lot in these great videos. So, and I'll do that from the standpoint of climate, air pollution, and environmental justice. So a lot of us may not have realized until recently that buildings really are a source of greenhouse gas emissions, and there are 70 million in the US that burn fossil fuels, and that accounts for about 10% of our greenhouse gas emissions. More from space and water heating, but also from cooking. And as you can see this at the bottom, there are 43, actually it should read 43 million gas stoves in the US have the same climate change effect as the amount of CO2 from 500,000 gasoline powered cars. Next slide. So as Laura has talked about, natural gas, so-called natural gas, is methane, and it is much more potent than carbon dioxide in its first 20 years, more than 80 times as potent. They call it CO2's evil twin. And as Laura also mentioned, it leaks all along its life cycle from fracking wells into our homes. And we now know that these leaks really are twice the amount that the EPA has estimated, and that, in fact, makes methane worse than coal in warming our climate. Next slide. So this year, we learned that our gas stoves and ovens also leak methane even when they're off. Eric LaBelle and others at Stanford measured methane levels in homes with both new and older gas stoves when they were on and when they were off, and found that 76% of emissions of methane occurred when they were off. And it didn't really matter whether they were new or old. Next slide. So cooking with gas pollutes our indoor air. If it's bad for the climate, it's bad for your health. We have had a love affair with our gas stoves, successfully promoted by the gas industry. But it's only recently, I think, that we've really become aware of how dangerous gas stoves and ovens are by emitting these toxic air pollutants inside of our homes. Nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, and sulfur dioxide. I will talk about the first three. These are basically the same pollutants that we find in car exhaust. Next slide. So nitrogen dioxide. Well, on average, we spend more than 90% of our time indoors. The World Health Organization in Canada have indoor standards for levels of nitrogen dioxide, but in the US, we have none. And so we have found that in homes with gas stoves, NO2 levels exceed both the indoor guidelines and the outdoor standards. And in fact, they're 50 to 400% higher than those in homes that cook with electric stoves. Next slide. So these levels we not only find in the kitchen, but they quickly escape to other parts of the house. The red line you can see are the levels of nitrogen dioxide in the kitchen, and the blue line in the bedroom. The standard for both indoor and outdoor air is about 100 parts per billion, which may be actually too high. But as you can see in 3 of these 4 scenarios, NO2 levels were higher than 100 parts per billion in the bedroom as well as the kitchen. And you can see how quickly these levels rise, the upward spike, such that they rise to levels that are unsafe in less time than it takes to scramble an egg. Next slide. So nitrogen dioxide is a lung irritant that causes, exacerbates, and triggers asthma, especially in children. 2013 meta-analysis of 41 different studies concluded that children living in a home with a gas stove had a 42% increase in the risk of asthma, a 24% increase in the risk for lifetime asthma, and a 32% increased risk of current asthma. And not only that, these levels start at low levels. In another study, children ages 5 to 10 exposed to NO2 levels indoors found worsening of symptoms at levels as low as 6 parts per billion, and continued worsening of those symptoms as these levels rise for every 5 parts per billion increase. Next slide. So particulate matters, so-called PM 2.5. So these these tiny particles have been called a silent killer and are responsible for more than 9 million deaths each year worldwide from air pollution. That's almost 20% of all deaths. On the far left, you can see this structure, this graphic that looks kind of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and that represents the human hair. And the small blue dot just to the right of it is the size of PM 2.5. So we breathe these tiny particles deep into our lungs, into our tiny air sacs, where they enter our bloodstream, causing damage to our vital organs, hearts, blood vessels, lungs, brains, and our reproductive system. So acutely, exposure to PM 2.5 increases blood pressure and the risk of stroke. And chronic exposure increases the risk of premature mortality, asthma, premature birth, and low birth weight babies. Next slide. Well, you may wonder, doesn't cooking itself produce PM 2.5? Well, that's true, yes, at high temperatures especially. But gas stoves produce twice as much, and electric stoves don't release NO2, carbon monoxide, or other air pollutants. Excuse me. Next slide. Carbon monoxide. There are no safe levels. And carbon monoxide displaces oxygen so that the tissues that are affected first are the heart and brain. And certainly the elderly, children, and the fetus, and those with underlying health conditions, like this woman experiencing either angina or a heart attack, are the most sensitive to the effects of carbon monoxide. Every year, people die from carbon monoxide poisoning that's not related to car exhaust. And many of those are from trying to use gas to heat their homes. Next slide. Well, in terms of environmental justice, we know that across the country, people of color and communities with lower incomes are disproportionately exposed to outdoor air pollution, so that indoor air pollution from burning gas in our home is a double burden. Lower income and people of color are more likely to live in smaller homes, so the concentration of pollutants is higher. And in multi-generational homes with more people, stoves and ovens are used more, increasing levels of pollutants also. They may not have adequate ventilation. And certainly if you're using your stove or oven for supplemental heat, that is going to definitely increase your levels of pollution. Also, people of color and people of low income are more likely to live in areas where they're exposed to higher levels of outdoor pollution, often adjacent to highways or industrial facilities. And these populations often have a higher incidence of underlying conditions like asthma. Next slide. So what can you do to decrease your risk, of your family's risk, if you do have a gas stove? So we've already heard some of these from this great presentations of folks in homes, and both of them had induction stoves, but you can also cook with electric appliances that you may already own, like an electric tea kettle, a toaster oven, an Instapot, or your microwave. And you can get a single burner induction plug-in for less than $100. Well, when you're ready to replace your gas stove, definitely try to go electric. In the meantime, you should try to install a carbon monoxide monitor. Always run the fan, but to be effective, use it on its highest speed, because most hoods or exhaust hoods work best if you cook on the back burners. A survey in California found that less than half of the people with gas stoves use their fans at all. Also, open a window unless, next slide, there are high levels of air pollution from wildfires, and then don't open the windows. And in fact, you really shouldn't be using your gas ovens and stoves. So the bottom line is, next slide, that electric kitchens are healthier. These are three studies that have been done to demonstrate that. There's indirect evidence from a longitudinal study done in California over 20 years, showing that when pollution controls were required for cars, NO2 levels decreased and childhood asthma levels decreased, and those tracked in tandem, so that the lower, as the NO2 levels dropped, so did asthma levels. Secondly, a study done in Boston in which residents of public housing were moved to all electric apartments, it showed that there were significant decreases in multiple indoor air pollutant levels and improved outcomes of health issues, health indicators among residents. And lastly, a study in Baltimore randomized 78 homes with gas stoves to receive one of 3 interventions to decrease their NO2 levels. And they measured those continuously over a week: a hood, a carbon filter system, or an electric stove. So replacing the gas stove with an electric one was the most effective intervention, and providing a hood was the least effective. So, next slide. In summary, burning anything indoors is not healthy. We need to electrify everything. And individual action certainly helps, but it's not enough. So talking to your friends and working for policies that make electrification the way of the future and possible for everyone is the way to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anne. So we have a little time for questions. That was very informative. Thank you. If people want to ask Anne, and then also again, if we don't have time to get to them all, they can move into the chat afterwards.
We do have a few questions. One of them from Linda. When speaking about gas stoves, do you include propane in that as well?
Well, I certainly think that it makes sense to include propane. It hasn't been studied nearly as well, but it is definitely one of the things that needs to be studied. And since it is a fossil fuel and does burn to the same, it causes the same kind of air pollution, it makes sense to think that the propane is equal to methane gas.
Awesome, thank you. And then a question from Carolyn about what else in the home besides stoves can produce these dangers.
Well, if you have a gas fireplace insert, that's doing the same thing inside your home. There's some question of whether or not your gas furnace or water heater or electric dryer may kind of put gas back into your home, even though it's vented to the outside. If you have a gas water heater, even an on-demand, particularly an on-demand gas water heater, every time you turn on, at any moment you just slightly turn on your hot water, it releases a puff of methane. So methane itself doesn't produce a health risk inside your home, but it's creating more methane.
Awesome, thank you. And then I think maybe one last question about wood burning stoves also being considered.
Yes, well, wood is essentially another fossil fuel, and it basically produces the same. Actually, I'm not sure so much about the nitrogen dioxide, but it certainly produces particulate matter. I would have to look into that for sure, but it's definitely produces indoor pollutants.
Alrighty, awesome. Well, there might be a couple that we can come back to later, but I think Laura, if we want to move on.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you, Anne, for joining us. I really appreciate your sharing. So we're going to go, we are going to go to our next video. So this is Will and Leah's house, and Will and Leah are actually not able to be here. It's their daughter's birthday today, so we won't have questions for them. If you want to type your questions in the chat, I could ask them and try to get back to you if something comes up, particularly about their site. And also, each of these homes have a web page, a page on the website with more details, like the manufacturers of their different systems, details if they hired someone to install it. So if you want to go and get specific ideas or go back to find out what the really specific thing was that you saw, you can go to the website, and that will be, it's recorded down there for you.
We like being able to go out into our backyard and say, oh man, this is amazing. We've grown this and done this with our own two hands.
And also demonstrating to our kids that we can live this way and enjoy it. Hi, welcome to our home. I'm Will.
And I'm Leah. We're going to tell you what we've been up to in our home and our yard for the past few years.
The heating system was very minimal when we bought the house. There's a wood stove, but otherwise it was basically electric heaters in the bedrooms on the walls. No air conditioning, or no central air at all. And so we opted to put in a heat pump mini split system that has units in each of the major rooms.
With the insulation, we had someone come out and check which walls were actually insulated and not, and had some insulation blown into the cavities, and also got the insulation redone in the attic as well, because there was virtually nothing up there too. We also insulated the floor underneath in the crawl space, which really helped with cold winter mornings. There were a number of windows that were single pane still, and so we went through and replaced those with double pane windows that don't leak air. And we were able to, in some instances, we had to order new windows that would fit the existing space, but we were also able to use some reused windows from Bring. We got a new roof. The old roof was being slowly devoured by pine needles. We got a white metal roof for the longevity of it, and also the color white is supposed to reflect heat. So it definitely helps with the cooling in the summer. We have to do less cooling, especially in the attic bedroom. We've been able to find a number of things that Bring that kind of matched the decor and style. We found some cabinets that matched our existing cabinets. We were able to reuse some old IKEA shelves and modify them so they look built in. We found some really great reused doors that look brand new, and we got to install those. So we got the yurt to use as kind of an additional bedroom, like a flexible space that we can either use as an office or the kids can run around and play in.
And we were able to make the yurt kind of an off-grid space, so Will installed a solar panel next to it and hooked it up so all of the power in the yurt is from solar.
And then we're able to use the photovoltaic system in the yurt to power tools in the yard, which is really great when we're moving water into and out of the duck pond and things.
And we have water catchment off the yurt as well, and so we have a rain barrel that collects all of that water. It's very useful.
We have actually a fair number of rain barrels because this house has a lot of downspouts that are spread out in different areas. We have some that are 300, one 500-gallon barrel, and a couple of 1,500-gallon barrels. And those are still overflowing by the end of the spring. But it's nice to have that reserve of water. And one of them is dedicated for the sandbox too, so the kids can play with water all they want and the hose isn't running and we don't have to worry about that.
We got baby chicks and baby ducklings, and they have been great. So we have a flock of 11, all female, and they lay 11 eggs a day. From a practical standpoint, they keep down weeds majorly, and they also are a huge advantage in our vegetable garden. We let them in the winter so that they can eat all of the aphids and the bugs and the slugs, and we have a lot less trouble with things eating our vegetable garden because of our ducks.
The last couple of years, we've gotten commercial packages of bees from Eugene Backyard Farmer. It's been really rewarding because we've been able to get some honey from it, and the honey is really delicious, and the kids love watching them. Our goal from the beginning with our landscape was kind of twofold. One, we wanted to grow food that we can eat and that we'll enjoy, and then two, we wanted to, I mean, maybe this makes us sound lazy, but we wanted to put in, as little effort as possible. It's a bigger lot, and so we've been trying to encourage edible weeds maybe, or edible ground cover. For instance, we have wild radishes that grow in the backyard and they keep out other weeds, but we can pluck them and have them in a salad or something like that. So we've been trying to do that in different zones around the yard.
We have some orchard spaces where we have fruit trees and nut trees, almonds and our hazelnuts. We also have our main big vegetable garden, which takes up most of the center of our backyard, and that's where we do our kind of seasonal stuff, grow our vegetables every year. We plant strawberries in our orchards because it's great ground cover, it keeps the weeds down, and then we get some strawberries from it too. So,
when we are able to eat soup that's made entirely from what we have in our yard, it tastes a little bit better. There's something a little bit special to that, and it's nice to know that there's not as much of a climate impact. The food wasn't trucked here. It was something that just came from the ground without chemicals or anything like that. In our yard, we've been able to use some old gates. They were originally screen doors, but we've repurposed them as gates, and they've worked really well. And we found other ones that Bring, and I think they look pretty nice, and they're much easier than building a gate from scratch. If someone's interested in making their home, greener and more sustainable, I would just encourage people to take it one step at a time. Sometimes these things can be really daunting, but you don't have to jump right to a gigantic rain barrel or 11 ducks. But a little small step, and then learn as you go, because we didn't know how to do any of this stuff really when we started, and we've just kind of learned and adapted and changed plans.
Talk to people who've done it before. Talk to people at Bring. They're amazing. They have lots of ideas and lots of things to learn online too.
Thanks for coming and taking a look at our house.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
So that was Will and Leah's house. Very beautiful yard and so many cool reuse projects out in their landscape. I hope you got to see some of the stuff. We didn't talk about all of it in the video, but you could see all of the different features in their landscape they had mostly gotten from Bring. And so if you have any questions for them, any specific questions, you can write them down and then I'll try to get back to you about that. But we're gonna jump to our next video. And this was the house of Betsy, who will be here. So you'll be able to ask her.
I have to do all that I can in my power and model it for other people. I'm hoping that other people see it and they go, oh, that's kind of cool, I could do that. Hi, my name is Betsy Hitz. Welcome to my home. This is the site that I've been stewarding for over 5.5 years, and I'm really excited to share it with you. I moved here after living in Albuquerque, New Mexico for 25 years. Everything about that climate the exact opposite of here. My house was huge. Every house I lived in was huge before I got here. So I moved into Eugene. Everything got smaller, which I know is good, and I really embrace that now. On the winter solstice is when my heat pump was installed. And right after that, I noticed that, of course, it's much quieter, very efficient. It's located on the wall in my kitchen, and the air gets shunted down the hallway and goes into the various rooms, and my electricity bill started to plummet. So I'm very, very happy with the heat pump, and I highly recommend that anybody who can put in a heat pump. In my environment, indoors and out, I do try to reduce, reuse, recycle all the way across the board. I try to not buy new things if I possibly can. I try to recycle lumber, and I try to use, rocks and stones that I might find to build beds or things like that. The wine bottles that I have dug in to make a little fence out there was just an idea that I got from, I had been on a trip somewhere and I saw this wall made of glass bottles. It was absolutely beautiful. I don't know if I'll ever do it, but I might. Making that border was, all these things out here in the garden is like a true labor of love. I try to make art artistic and very useful at the same time. I love the idea of useful art. This is the north, or the native garden, if you will. It has a growing fence of natives. I put in drought-tolerant plants as much as possible. There's the Oregon grapefruit and the red flowering currant. Behind me, there's a fig tree growing, and I keep it chopped quite low. Keep it pruned up nicely so that I can harvest it. But last year I actually got 2 harvests, first time ever. I have an herb garden growing right over here. Now I have this espaliered pineapple guavas growing here. Actually, I brought in the raised beds for the vegetables over there and had a fence put in around it. And other species of natives here, I have evergreen huckleberry growing over there. And up near the house in the shady area, I have a lot of the native bleeding heart. Well, this is a solar food dryer that my handy person made. It's pretty cool. It sat over on my property 3 different places until I really learned it's all about how much solar gain are you going to get. So here it is on the south side of my neighbor's house. This is where the sun hits the solar food dryer and heats up the air, which then goes up into the back unit there where the shelves of drying food are. There's a fan back there that I plug in, and it circulates the air to make sure that bacteria, mold doesn't grow on the food. I did this because I like using the sun. I'm really in favor of using our resources in a really smart way. The summer after I moved in, I had been thinking about putting solar panels on, and I said, I'm just going for it. Even though my roof is east and west facing, I didn't have the perfect south face. I talked to Newt at Solar Assist, and he said, you can do it. Put it on that west side, You could put 14 to 18 panels. 14 would be enough. 16 will give you a little more, 18 even more, because I'm on that west side where I get 85% of the sun that I would get if it was south facing. So I have 16 panels up there, again, to give me that little cushion. What I noticed right away, it happened immediately, is, well, within the first year, is that 6 months out of the year, so half of the year, I harvest more energy from the sun than I use to power my life. And part of the powering my life includes that I power my electric vehicle that sits out behind my house. I don't have a charger. I don't need a charger because I just plug into the 110, and that's all I need for the driving that I do. I try to walk more, try to take the bus. I had a carport built, and then I'm noticing all the water running off this carport, and I'm going, okay, it needs a gutter, and oh, if I'm gonna put up a gutter, why don't I put a rain barrel right there? So all the water runs off the carport into the gutter, into the rain barrel, and then I have a hose attached to the top, which is the overflow, if you will, and I just run that out and move it around in my environment. There's two quotes that really kind of get into the heart of the matter and how I live my life. And one of them is a John Lewis quote where he said, "Do not get lost in a sea of despair." And the other one is a quote that I have on my refrigerator, and I really take it to heart, and that is, "The antidote to despair is action." So I thank you all for coming to watch this video, and I hope you got something out of it. Take care.
Great. So thank you, Betsy, for opening up your home for us. And there you are. Thanks for being here.
Hi.
Awesome. Well, folks, please feel free to pop some more questions in the Q&A. We've got one from Jeff that asks, why have your panels facing west rather than east? And does it really make a difference?
Well, the solar experts will say very strongly that it makes a difference. You get a lot more solar gain from the west than you do from the east. Think about how warm it is in the summer when on the west side of your house. And actually, I can't speak intelligently as to exactly why that is, but it is.
Awesome. Thank you. And then let's see, Sandy would love if you could say a bit more about the solar dehydrator.
Yes, a bit more. I start using it each year. I've had it maybe 3-4 seasons now, and I don't start using it until like August, because that's when the harvests really start coming in. So for instance, I have a grapevine here. This is like 0.1 acre that I live on. I try to totally use everything that's not covered with cement, or my house. And I have a grapevine, and I harvest all those grapes, and then I make my own raisins. So that's one big thing. And I also sometimes get peaches and cut them up, or tomatoes. So I use it in August. Now, what were the specific questions about? What's my favorite food to dehydrate? I like making my own raisins. I'm just crazy about that. I don't know why, I do. And tomatoes too are good, and peaches and pears. I do all those in there. I find that the harder ones to dry are the ones that are very watery. They take a long time, and you have to keep checking them. I learned the hard way. You have to have the fan to circulate the air, or you just, especially with the watery things, it gets moldy, and that just doesn't work at all.
Awesome. And then there was also a question about, you might know, if commercial solar food dryers are available.
Commercial solar food dryers. I don't know. I know that my handy person, Mark, here in Eugene, he used plans from Mother Earth News, and then he changed them up a little bit to make this, but I actually don't know if they're available for sale. They should be.
Awesome. Let's see what other questions we've got. That might be all of the questions, but oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I see Vincent put in here. Don't forget to mention that Newt's solar company is called Solar Assist. So I did work with Newt from Solar Assist.
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. And on the page for her house, there is that information about the company, Solar Assist, that put in those panels. So yeah, is there anything else, Eloise, or should we, our next presentation is about solar energy. So that's a really good segue into it.
Yeah, I think we are ready to move on to the next one.
Great.
Right.
So we're going to hear about solar energy for the home from Vince from Energy Design, which was mentioned in the first video. Vince did the installation from the first site you saw. So I'm going to share my screen. And Vince, we were having a little glitch with screen sharing this morning that didn't get worked out in time. So I'm going to be advancing your slides.
Okay, great. So I've been a longtime solar advocate. I started in my early 20s when I was living in Hawaii and kind of perfected my skills over all these years. When we first started putting up solar, no one knew how to do it. But I got to install some of the very first commercially available products back in the early 1980s and just kind of grew from there. I'm also an electrician by trade and have owned 3 companies that do solar at this point in my life.
Great, thanks, Vince. I think your slide shows up, so I think you're all ready to go. Just say next slide when you want me to advance.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to go over the options that are available for solar homes and some of the different caveats and pluses and minuses of different systems. Here's a typical roof-mounted solar electric system. This one has also a battery installed on it. And we'll go over that in more detail later on. Next slide, please. So the most common solar electric systems, like what's on Beth and Jim's house, are called grid tie systems. And that type of system simply feeds the power from the solar electric array through a, oh gosh, I don't have my normal controls on the Zoom channel. I guess I can you see my cursor? Okay.
No, we can't see your cursor. Just kind of talk us through it.
Okay, I'll just have to describe it then. So if you look at the solar panels on the roof and there's the line coming down going to a green box, that green box represents a grid tie inverter. And the grid tie inverter takes the high voltage DC power from the solar array and converts it into something that actually works for your home, 120, 240 volt AC power. That feeds your electrical box. Then anything that's running in the house at that time will be running directly off your solar array, unless you don't have enough solar coming in which case you'll be pulling power from the grid and from the solar to run your house's loads. Grid tie is the least expensive and most efficient way of installing solar. The only real drawback to grid tie is that when the utility is down, so is your system. The codes require that we don't feed power back in because we could injure a line worker. So the inverters have a safety disconnect on them. As soon as the grid goes down, your electric system will disconnect. Okay, so next slide. Here's a couple of pictures of typical grid tie inverters. The one on the left is installed at a farm out in Dexter. And that's an SMA, a German company that makes really good inverters. They've been at this pretty much longer than anyone else. One on the right is a Solar Edge, which is unique in that Solar Edge has a optimizer behind each panel. So it's a good choice if you have a partially shaded roof because it makes each solar panel completely individual. Next slide. So If you wanted to have a battery backup system, which is primarily what batteries are used for now, there's a solar system called a hybrid system. And it's kind of like a combination of a grid tie and an off-grid system combined into one, which is why we call it a hybrid system. That works a little bit differently. The solar DC power comes into the hybrid inverter directly and then goes out to loads in the house when the grid's available, or back feeds the grid if you're not using all the power, runs your meter backwards. And then if the utility goes down, you have a battery backup there. So unlike the grid tied system where the utilities, if the utility's down, your power system's down, your solar electric's down, this provides a little bit of backup power depending on how large your battery is and how much solar power is coming in. So often what we do is, instead of just taking the power from that inverter and running it to power your whole house, we put in something called an essential loads panel. So we'll put another electric panel, a sub panel, in next to the main panel, and we'll pull out circuits like your lighting. If you're on a well, we'll put the well pump in there, refrigeration, the modem for your internet system, things that you really make a big difference on living in your home. It might be even a little bit of power to a ductless heat pump or something like that to keep the home warm. But the batteries are limited in their storage capability, obviously, so you've got a finite amount of storage. And you don't want to run that down too fast, so we're not going to put things like an electric water heater and most electric stoves, although inductive stoves don't draw nearly as much. So we recommend that during a power outage, people run an electric inductive hot plate or something like that. Next slide, please. So here's a couple of examples of DC coupled hybrid inverters, also called multimodal inverters because they are both grid tied and are operating off a battery. I prefer these type of inverters because the DC power comes directly in from the solar, high efficiency, and goes into the batteries you can see down underneath the inverters, or actually one's on top of the inverters on the right hand and underneath the inverters. This is a company called Solarc. It's an American company based out of Texas. And we've had the best results with that particular product coupled with the specific battery that we have underneath. We've tried about 6 or 7 different types of combinations of solar inverters and batteries, and this is the one that has been the least glitchy. It's still a new technology, so there's still been some issues with the technology. The biggest drawback of multimodal systems is their cost. They do everything that a grid tie system does, and with this type of system as efficiently. And but those 2 batteries down there, you're looking at about $12,000 of cost. And a multimodal inverter costs a lot more than a standard inverter. A standard inverter is, usually around $2,000 to $3,000. That Solarc there is more like $7,000. So the biggest drawback for battery-based systems is the cost. And again, this type of inverter is more efficient at round-trip power. So power from the solar into your home, into the battery, and then back out again to power loads in the home. Solarcs are up to about 7% efficiency loss. So they're only losing 7% of the round-trip power from solar panels to power back to your home. Then let's go to the next slide. So there's another way to do this, and that's called an AC coupled hybrid system. So the biggest advantage of AC coupled systems is that, let's say you installed solar on your home, 5 or 10 years ago. So you already have solar, your roof space is already taken up, the inverter probably has a lot of life left, but you'd like to add a battery. So this is the way we would do that. So the power comes from the solar array, goes to your grid tie inverter, just like it would with a grid tie system, then goes to a switchboard, which is usually just a load center electrical panel. Then the AC power from the inverter, when the grid's down, feeds another inverter. And that inverter then manages the battery and will provide power when the utility's down. The biggest drawback with AC coupled systems is they're not as efficient. We're going from DC on the roof, creating AC power, 120, 240 volt regular household power, feeding a panel, taking that AC power to the multi-mode inverter, and then it converts the power back to DC so it can charge a battery and use that battery. So depending on the types of systems, you can lose up to 28% of your power that way. Most of them are, around 12 to 20 or so, but one of the systems we work with actually loses quite a bit of power. Next slide, please. So here's a good example of a AC coupled hybrid system. This one was with lead acid batteries. So the lead acid batteries you see there on your left are considerably smaller than the two batteries that we saw in their capacity. The two batteries that I showed on the prior screen have 10.8 kilowatt hours of power available. And to kind of give you an idea of the battery and how much power that is, an average electric home in Oregon uses about 30 kilowatt hours of power per day. So providing 10 kilowatt hours of power, of course, is only going to give you a fraction of what you use on a daily basis. That's why we put in the essential loads panel and limit the amount of power that a home would draw during a power outage. So this system, you've got the multimodal inverter on the left-hand side. That's that big box next to the blue batteries. And that is managing the battery system. Then there's the electrical panel that interfaces those two systems in between. And on the right-hand side, up that little white box is your grid tie inverter. So power is coming from the grid tie, from the solar to the grid tie inverter, feeding AC power back to the multimodal inverter to manage batteries and keep the home active during a grid outage. Let's go ahead and advance the slide. Here's the first grid tied system I built back in 2000. None of this equipment is on the market anymore. The big inverter you see on the right-hand side of the screen there is a trace inverter. That company got bought out by Xantrex a number of years ago. And then there's a Xantrex sun tie inverter on the left-hand side of the screen. So with this system, because that big inverter right there was only a 4,000 watt inverter, it wasn't enough to handle the entire power from the solar array. So we have that inverter and then the standard grid tie inverter coupled to it. So that's another option. You can have both at the same time. Let's go ahead and advance. So most solar electric systems are roof mounted. It's a great place to put solar. The structure is already there. And we have special flashings that we use to make sure that our penetrations into the building will never leak. The solar industry has gotten very good products for that type of thing now. Go ahead and advance the slide. And the way we put solar on a building, on the left-hand side, you see what we call racking. It's an extruded aluminum anodized rail that the inverters attach to. And there's several advantages to doing it this way. It keeps the solar array up off the roof a little ways. The hotter a solar cell is, the less actual power you get out of it. Just like any conductor or semiconductor, the hotter it is, the more resistance there is to the electricity flow through the cell or through the substrate. And so when you put that solar array up off the roof like that, it allows the air from behind the array to vent out. You get something called a stack effect or chimney effect, where the hot air goes up and out and draws cool air in from outside. That's one of the reasons that solar roofs haven't taken off that fast. It's because it's harder to produce a product that really works well during the heat of summer. So on the right-hand side, you can see that same system after we've added the solar to it. And I also wanted to point out another option, which you can see on the left photo. Those little tiny silver boxes that are attached to the solar rails on the roof are called microinverters. And microinverters are a grid tie inverter that there's an individual inverter for each solar panel. And then that AC power just feeds down off the roof to your main panel. They're good for areas that have partial shading across the roof. If you've got a shade that kind of moves across the roof during the day, which is pretty common in Eugene. We've got lots of trees. And they're similar to the solar edge inverters in that they will manage that shading fairly well. And there's no need for putting an inverter somewhere on your house. It's already tucked up under the roof. The biggest drawback with microinverters is they're in a environmentally, well, how do you say this? They're in a place that thermal cycles. So they get really hot and really cold. And so the electronics can wear out faster because electronics wear out faster based on thermal cycling. So those can get up to about 140 degrees during the daytime, and then in the winter they're getting really cold, so they wear out a little faster. That particular company though has a 25-year warranty on their product, so that just means we're going to have to come out and replace inverters. Next slide, please. Here's another option for roof mounting. This is a commercial job we did up in Salem, and when we have a standing seam roof, which is a special kind of metal roof, we can just add these clips onto the roof so there's no penetrations through the roofing material. Kind of a big advantage. And standing seam roof is probably about the longest lasting roofing material on the market. So when we put up a solar array on a standing seam roof, we know we're not going to have to come back in 20 years and pull the solar back down, have the roof replaced, and put it back up again. This particular project, one of the things I'd like to bring up about standing seam roofs is that the solar array is only as attached as the roofing is. So we really want to know that the roofing contractor put the adequate number of roofing clips down that attach the standing seam back to the building. With this particular roof, when we showed up on site, the roofing was about 1/4 of an inch off of the decking, the roof decking, which was a OSB. And we figured out what had happened is the roofing contractor had put the roof on when the roofing was wet. The substrate was wet, so that OSB was completely drenched, and they just threw the roof on top of it. And then what happened is, because it's a metal roof, it expands during the daytime and pushes out, and at night it contracts and pulls in. It literally worked the screws loose on the roofing material. So before we got started, we had the roofing contractor come out, and on their warranty, they fixed all that. Next slide, please. Here's another pretty common option. This is a membrane roof. If you look kind of over underneath the far edge of the roof, that's why I really wish I had my pointer. We've put in these little things called standoffs that attach to rafters in the building. Then we have a roofing contractor come in behind us and weld a roofing jack or a flashing around the post that we put in. And it's a very good solid way of keeping the water out of your building and putting solar in. Next slide, please. And then we get to ground mounted systems, which if you have the area for them are great. Although the big drawback here is that you're taking up some area that you could be doing something else, gardens or trees or something else. This is a very common ground mount system. We've been using these for about 4 or 5 years now. There is no concrete foundation underneath it. The solar array attaches to the ground using a stainless steel cable and a ground anchor. So we literally shoot a ground anchor in on a stainless steel cable under the ground, and then we tension each of those ground anchors to 4,000 PSI. And so that holds the array to the ground so that we don't have to use concrete to put in as a base. Concrete is not an very environmental product. For every ton of concrete, it produces a ton of CO2 gases. So we've been trying to get away from using concrete. Next slide, please. Here's another ground mounted system. This one has the concrete bases. In this particular site, it's too sloped to use the other type of system that I just showed you. And so we have standard little kind of concrete footings where each pole comes down. And another advantage of ground mount is you can put a whole lot of solar in. This is a site up in Corvallis. It's a 25 kilowatt site. So average home kilowatt, the average size of a solar electric system for homes is usually between about 5 to 10. So this fellow really wanted to have a lot of power. So he put this in on the hill above his house. Next slide. Here's another option, pole mounted systems. This is a triple pole system where we've aligned up 3 poles, and then there's solar racks that go on top of the poles. And then we bolt those together to form one particular system. This is also kind of a larger system. This is 16.2 kilowatts down in the glide area. And to point out something that wouldn't be really obvious is you see how tilted that array is? It's at a much higher tilt than towards the south than we typically tilt our systems. And that's because this is an off-grid home. So we're aiming the solar array at the wintertime sun, because in the summertime, this fellow has way more power than he'll ever use. So as the sun gets lower in the horizon during the winter, we want to kind of prioritize getting as much winter power as we can. Although this particular rack, you can kind of see the little things hanging off of it on the back, if you look at the right-hand side. And that's a crank that allows us to change the tilt on the system. So we can tilt it back towards the sun, the summer sun, if he needs us to. Next slide. And then there's custom mounting systems. The one on the left is the Eugene Science Center. And we had such a problem with that project because we looked at 3 or 4 different ways of putting solar on the building. And the building still has an old, what we call torch down roof with aggregate on top of it. So there's literally rocks on top of the roofing system. And the building's kind of old, so it didn't meet current standards for how structural the roof is. And already under current codes, just the weight of the rocks on top of the building was as much as that roofing system could handle. So that meant that we couldn't add anything to the roof. So then we looked at a big awning off the south side there and found out that that didn't work, mainly because of cost. Finally, Tim, who's the manager at Eugene Science Center, says, well, why don't we just put a small, we'd also looked at a double awning, but then one solar array shades out the top solar array will shade out the bottom one. So he says, well, why don't we just mount them vertically? And it's like, Tim, well, we're going to lose like almost 40% of the power output of the solar array if we mount vertical panels like that. You know, the angle of incident to the sun throughout the year is just not ideal when you put power panels directly on a building like that. And he looks up at me and he says, well, I don't care. I'm getting the panels for free. And he got a donation from a company that recycles panels and gives them to nonprofits. And I was like, you got a point there. So that we ended up building the system that way to accommodate all the panels that he was given. So an awning underneath and a vertical array. The other one on the right-hand side is a system that we built up on College Hill on Lincoln Street. That it's just a custom rack. We had a metal fabricator build it. And what you don't see is that those steel posts go down into a slab, and that's what supports the array. And that's been up there. I think we built that in 2008 or so. But that's all of my presentation. I just wanted to go over briefly what the options are for solar.
Thank you so much, Vince. That was really informative. I'm wondering if you could just mention the current rebates. And I don't think we're going to have any time for questions other than in the chat. People, maybe Vince could stay a little bit and answer questions in the chat that you have. But if you could mention what the current rebates are, federal and state.
Well, currently we have through the end of the year, a 26% federal tax credit, which allows you to take money off of what you would have normally paid the federal government in taxes. And so that's been a really good incentive for people. That goes down to 22% next year. It's a tax credit's designed to kind of get the solar industry up and running, so it goes down a little bit every year or every 2 years. And then there's often utility by utility incentives. eWeb has a small incentive that they provide. Lane Electric also has one. It's you kind of got to have to look at who your utility is and what they have available. And then there's also the Oregon Solar and Storage Rebate Program, which it's an interesting program. It's through the Oregon Department of Energy, and it works really well for people that are lower income, because they have a much higher rebate amount for lower income people. So it can cover a much larger percentage of the cost of installing solar. And it also has, as it mentions in the title, the Oregon Solar and Storage Rebate Program, it covers batteries as well as solar.
Great. Thank you again so much. And I do see some questions coming in. So if you are able to and could answer them in the chat, that would be awesome. Sure. Otherwise, we can try to get back to people. So we're going to go on and see another another site. And let me share my screen. And so this site is actually a community garden site. So it's a little bit different. It's not a home, and it's the Churchill Garden of Huerto de la Familia, or the Family Garden, which is a nonprofit. And we are interviewing in the video one of the gardeners who also works for Huerto. And afterwards, we're going to have a garden member, as well as another person who works for Huerto, who is a different person than the video, because Elva, who's in the video, is not able to be here today. She's at a training. So you will be able to ask your questions about the garden, about the program, about Huerto, to Tim, who will be here after the video. So and this was filmed in April. So this garden, by August, all the plants are huge and giant. I live really close to here. It's one of my favorite places to walk to. But right now, this is the spring garden. So things are in the spring season. And this video is filmed in Spanish. Elva is very bilingual, but Spanish is her home language. And so we did the video in Spanish. And I want to thank Paul and Jordan, who edited this video, for really taking a leap and editing in a language that they don't speak. So that made it more challenging for them, but they were up for it. And we have one of our videos in Spanish, which I'm really happy about. And it's subtitled, but we also have it without the subtitles, which you can get to on the website in a couple.
Es fácil, único para empezar a plantar, solo necesitas luz, tierra y ganas de hacerlo, y agua. Hola, mi nombre es Elva Webster y yo soy miembro del Huerto de la Familia por 4 años. Y ahora trabajo para el huerto. Y bienvenidos al Huerto de la Familia. Vengo de una familia de una comunidad pequeña, digamos una familia agricultora, que siempre plantaban las cosas básicas en esa área, que era maíz, frijol, calabaza. Y pues lo he visto y también nos hacían ayudarles. Entonces por muchos años pues no lo practicaba, pero llegó el momento cuando llegué aquí que me empezó a nacer ese amor para hacerlo otra vez. Y encontré este huerto y me encanta hacerlo. Teniendo 22 años viviendo aquí y la mayoría de esos años he vivido en apartamento, entonces es difícil crecer cosas. Por eso soy muy feliz que programas como Huerto de la Familia existen, porque nos da mucho la oportunidad de salir. Y no solamente a nosotros, sino cuando tienes niños chiquitos, pues es impresionante lo que a ellos les gusta, salir al huerto y también enseñarles cómo se crecen, de dónde vienen las zanahorias, los rábanos, los jitomates, para que tengan un poquito de conocimiento sobre las cosas, tradiciones de nuestras familias, de nuestros países y de nuestras comunidades. Me gusta sembrar jitomate, tomatillo, chiles, diferentes variedades de chiles, picantes, no picantes, maíz, calabaza, en tiempo de invierno, ajo, y también de vez en cuando me gusta plantar haba. Es bueno plantar las abonos verdes que le llamamos para mantener nuestra tierra saludable, es las habas. Las habas pueden traer mucho nitrógeno a la tierra, entonces en primavera cortamos todo, no sacamos la raíz para que los mismos nutrientes ayuden al crecimiento de nuestras plantas nuevas. También lo que no hago mucho es remover la tierra, porque si está uno removiendo la tierra, estás matando los microorganismos que viven en la tierra. Entonces lo que queremos es mantenerlos a ellos, porque ellos son los que nos ayudan a abonar o hacer el trabajo. La rotación también de verduras. El sistema que uso yo para proteger mis plantas de las plagas es usando las plantas de silpasuchi. He aprendido por medio del programa, por ejemplo, si plantas una planta de jitomate, planta jitomate, silpasuchi, porque el olor, el color, no les gusta a muchas plagas, entonces al mismo tiempo estás protegiendo y dale vida y color a tu huerto. También si plantas, por ejemplo, orégano, albahaca, las mismas plantas te protegen. Y yo no uso químicos, ni natural, ni orgánicos, ni no orgánicos en mi huerto. Lo único que uso son esas plantas y hasta ahorita ha funcionado muy bien. Invitamos a todos que practiquemos el sistema de compostaje. Varios de los miembros, por ejemplo, traen todos sus desperdicios de la cocina, verduras, frutas, y lo que vamos haciendo es hacer un hoyo en la tierra, y lo ponemos ahí, lo tapamos y podemos plantar encima. Es un sistema fácil, es simple, no tan profesional, pero funciona. Uno de nuestros miembros, él está teniendo sus colmenas de abejas aquí. Los beneficios son inmensos porque pues, nos polinizan nuestro jardín. Tenemos este sistema donde capturamos el agua de la lluvia Trajimos un tanque. Cuando llueve podemos tener esa agua porque a veces durante el verano el sistema de riego que tenemos se puede dañar y no tenemos agua para regar nuestras plantas. Así que es muy importante que podemos coleccionar el agua de la lluvia porque así podemos seguir regando nuestras plantas y evitar el problema pues, de que se nos mueran. Si es complicado en un apartamento, en la casa, pues te invito al huerto de la familia. Aquí mismo entre todos aprendemos, es fácil. Aquí nadie es experto. No necesitas ser un experto para empezar a plantar. Uno va aprendiendo en el proceso. Hay oportunidades por si quieres aprender más a profundo el tema de cualquier cosa, existen. Pero si solamente tienes poco tiempo y te gustaría aprender, solamente es fácil venir y hacerlo. Muchas gracias por venir y aprender un poquito sobre el programa del Huerto de la Familia y aprender sobre, pues, basado en mi experiencia, cómo es que trabajo el huerto.
Okay, so that was Elva, and I want to thank her for being part of the tour. And we have Tim to represent Huerto de la Familia as a gardener as well as a staff person. So thank you, Tim, for being here.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and to share with you all. Yeah, as Laura said, I've a garden member. I've been a garden member for 4 years now, and then I've been an employee with Centro Latinoamericano for about a year now.
Awesome. Well, I will go ahead. In the chat, we've got a question about if folks can visit the garden. And so if you could talk a little bit about how people can be involved, what it looks like to just come, anything like that.
Yes, you can visit the garden. We have volunteer days and public events, but you can't really just go whenever. The community gardens are locked and the members have a code to enter. So the public events are mainly during the volunteer days and during public events, but I could drop in the email of both the garden supervisor and Elva, who also does a lot of the outreach and the email listserv. So if you do want to get involved with helping, that's one way to visit.
And if I could just add the Churchill Garden, public walking path goes right by it. So if you just want to see it, you can just walk by, but you can't go in there unless it's the time when Tim said.
Oh yeah, definitely. You'll get a great view just walking along that path.
Awesome. I don't see any other specific questions, but yeah, I think folks would definitely appreciate having some of those contacts. I'll hand it back to you, Laura. I'm not seeing. Oh, we do have one. So Elva mentioned Mexican marigolds, oregano, and something else as effective pest controllers. Are there any other plants you use for this double purpose?
Yeah, marigolds are really good, but I know some garden members also use onions to repel certain pests, especially around chiles and tomatoes, and some other companion plants. I know some people use rosemary, but I'm not sure exactly what they're trying to prevent or in what ways. But the two I know most are the cempasúchil, which is the Mexican marigold, and onions.
Great, thanks.
Awesome.
And I see there are a few more questions coming in, but we got a little bit over time. So Tim, if you wouldn't mind answering the additional questions in the chat, if you're able to, otherwise we can get back to people.
Okay, yeah, I'll answer everybody in the chat. Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So we're gonna go on to our next site. So we have two more homes to see and one more presentation. So this is the home of Peter and Martha. And we're also going to hear from J.R. Morgan, who from Organic Roots, who does the landscape.
Business as usual is not working. It's human caused and it can be human corrected.
Yeah.
And the good news about global heating is that we can fix the problem. I'm Peter.
I'm Martha.
And we've lived in this home for about 3 years and have done quite a bit to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, made the home healthier, and reduced costs along the way. So welcome.
Yes, welcome to our home.
This home was built in 1988, and it had many good features. It has really good green bones.
Yeah,
it has overhead solar tubes in the ceilings. It has skylights, and it has the fans in 2 different rooms that help efficiency in the wintertime warming and summertime cooling. Dual pane windows and weather stripping along the exterior doors, and very well insulated. The home is extremely well insulated.
Yes, it is. Well, when we got here, we had a gas oven and stove, and we had gas heating and gas water heater too. One of the things we did to change that was to get an induction cooktop and convection oven that are all powered by electricity. And the induction cooktop is a fantastic piece of equipment because with it you can heat things really fast. You have minute control over the changes in temperature, and it's not polluting our kitchen with noxious fumes from gas. When we got our stove, we had to make sure all of our pans were magnetic because other types of pans won't work on an induction cooktop. So we have our handy magnet that we use to see if it will stick to the pan. If it does, then we know it will work on the induction cooktop, like that. Before we moved here, we actually had already bought a portable induction cooktop that we just used for single items, and it is very flexible, and we found it very helpful. This is really good for people who maybe can't quite or don't want to change their whole cooking equipment to electric yet. They can use this on a portable basis. It takes up less space, and it's right handy.
So very recently we replaced both our heating and cooling system and our water heater. We had an old gas water heater that was from 2003, 19 years old, and replaced it with this heat pump water heater. I want to point out too that eWeb has a rebate program, $800 per water heater. You can find water heaters through that program, heat pump water heaters for $1,200. So you end up paying $400 for your water heater, and eWeb supplies an $800 check. This is the air handler part of the system. The heat pump itself is mounted on a pedestal outside the home. It actually draws heat out of the air, and it can do that in very low temperatures. They work so much in the background you don't even know they're on. Regarding carbon emissions and cost of operation, the carbon emissions on a gas system are about 5 tons per year. On this system, it's 0.6 tons per year. So you're almost 10 times fewer carbon emissions with the electric heat pump system compared to a gas system. In terms of saving money and reducing carbon, actually electric cars I think are a top priority to think about acquiring, because zero emissions on the electric car. A typical gas car produces about a ton of emissions for every 3,000 miles of driving. But the money savings is incredible, because this car can fully charge on $8 worth of electricity and go 240 miles.
We were really not happy with our landscaping the way it was, and we wanted a change, and we found J.R. Morgan, and he did a fabulous job.
My name is J.R. Morgan, and I'm the owner of Morganic Roots Eco Firm. We specialize in design, education, and ecoscaping. We do a lot of regenerative landscaping. Here at Martha's and Peter's house, they really were looking for a place that they could have low maintenance plants, a place that the soil was being restored and improving the health of the soil, and also just having a low maintenance property. One of the best things about this property is that we were able to maximize space. As you guys can see, it's not a very big property, but there's a lot of productivity going on. People do ornamental shrubs or flowers in a place like this, but Peter and Martha, they preferred for this area to be able to grow food. So what we did is we put a garden bed here, and to make it easier to where you don't have to bend over, we have a bench where you can sit and do your gardening. In urban permaculture, one of the main focuses is maximizing space. And in this small corner, this is exactly what we did. Before I came, there was ornamental plants, hydrangeas, and we had to relocate those, and we put in multifunctional plants that are ornamental and edible. This red flowering currant is a perfect example of one of those types of plants. It's beautiful, but then it's also an edible. Right here we have the collard tree, which grows up to 10 feet tall. And this is a great one because it doesn't grow wide, it grows tall, and that helps with maximizing space.
Thanks for coming today. We're really glad you're able to be here. We're glad to be able to share with you what we've done and hope that you found some things that might be useful for you in your living environment.
Thank you for your time and your intention. Good luck on your journey.
Okay, so that was Peter and Martha and J.R. Morgan. So thank you for opening up your home. And we have Peter and Martha. I don't know, was J.R. able to be here?
No, he wasn't.
Wasn't able to. Okay, so we have.
Awesome. Well, if folks want to put their questions into the Q&A box, I will definitely go through them. Yeah, there's a note about the adaptive design. I think that was referring specifically to the raised bed, and I thought that was great as well.
I could give a couple of comments about the carbon reduction combined between the heat pump water heater and the heating and cooling system compared to what we were experiencing with our gas system. We were generating close to 7 tons per year of carbon emissions between those two systems. And now it's just the non-renewable part of the EWEB electric that's the only generating part. So we're producing less than a ton. We're about 0.6 tons between the two appliances, between the two units. And also, we haven't had the heat pump system long enough to see the cost savings, but according to projections, we should be saving about $500 to $600 a year on our utility bills. We do know from the induction range that we've had that for almost a year, and we're seeing savings of about $10 to $12 per month net on that. So.
Awesome. And I do see a question about what kind of induction cooker you have.
I forgot the brand.
Oh, GE.
It's a GE Cafe.
Awesome.
And I should add, this particular oven, when we purchased it, gave us a free set of cookware that was a very high quality cookware to be able to use on the cooktop. So that was a nice bonus.
Yeah, it was purchased through Kelly's here in Eugene.
Awesome. And then I think this can be our last question, but Mary's just curious if you have any more future plans for the home or the garden.
Well, today I learned about heat pump clothes dryers. Maybe we'll look into that. We can't do solar panels because of a number of factors. So we're stuck about that, but maybe community solar.
Yeah, community solar would be great if we could get that here in Eugene.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much. And if anybody have other questions, I want to put them in the chat. I hope Peter and Martha could stay a little bit and answer them that way. But we're going to go on to see our last site. This is this is a new construction, and the architect who designed the home is also going to be available afterwards. So just keep that in mind if you have questions about how it was designed as well as the home. Okay, so this is Dennis and Suzanne.
What used to be cutting edge is now available generally on the market to lots of people. The kind of ability that now exists for us to live out our values. Hi, my name's Dennis Reynolds.
And I'm Suzanne Reynolds.
And we want to thank you for, coming to see our house. And we want to start with the first part of the house we ever saw, which is this awesome tree out front. Let's go ahead and look at the rest of the property. We have a charger capacity for electric car here, means it was wired for 220. And then we built a little studio space at the back of that, and it has now a little studio space that has a loft bed and stuff in it, that it's a tiny house. And we had to add additional electrical capacity there because we have on-demand hot water in that part of the facilities.
And over here is the rain garden, our facility that takes care of all of the runoff from all of the hardscape that we built on this property. And we don't have connection to the stormwater, and so this takes care of it all.
Well, after we bought the land, the next kind of major decision we had to make was to look at kind of what kind of house we wanted to put in it. And we started looking at plan books, and then discovered that a friend of ours from where we then lived on Whidbey Island, Ross Chapin Architect, had some prepared plans for sale. They're much, much cheaper than buying a custom architectural piece, but you get that flavor of a really talented architecturally designed house. And we picked this one, and this particular design, we wanted a small footprint, and we knew we wanted 2 stories, which gives us a little more space with using less land. One of the reasons we really picked this design, Ross had a number of them, was we wanted a front porch. We wanted to be able to see who's coming and wave at neighbors as they walk by. Welcome inside, and one of the things we also liked about this design of Ross's was it's very open. One room, that's the great room. Then we next looked at systems for heating and cooling in particular. Current code requires some pretty good insulation as well as double pane windows and those kinds of things. So we've got that, but our primary heating cooling system is a split heat pump with 1 unit downstairs and 1 unit upstairs. Provides both heating and cooling. Filters too. Both of those were awesome during the smoke incursion we had 2 years ago and last year's heat wave. I have asthma. When the smoke incursion happened, I would have been really suffering if we weren't able to stay inside and have filtered air coming into the house.
When we came to back to Eugene early on, I went to a 350.org meeting, and they were talking a lot about no new fossil fuel infrastructure. And I thought, does that mean I can't have my gas stove? And the answer was yes, that means you can't have your gas stove. So I was also told to look into induction. And that's what we did. And we're very pleased with our induction cooktop. It's great. In the bathroom, the shower is very accessible, and we have our low flush toilets, both downstairs and upstairs.
One of the things about getting lots of done in a small spaces is how do you fit things in? And this space, which is called the flex room, is just not much bigger than a wide hallway, but it's office space for both of us. And back in the back, there's a little access to the attic we call the dog's room. Because the ceiling's higher downstairs to make the living room feel bigger, even though it's small, we ended up with these steps in the bedroom, which creates this sweet little bedroom loft.
And it has a
skylight
above it.
The bathroom's one of my favorite parts too, is in terms of one, the natural light is just amazing in here. And we got a number of used pieces that helped make this happen. The doorway was from Bring. This was a plain brown cabinet that we got at the Habitat store, painted it white and changed out the hardware. And this was a Craigslist score for the clawfoot bathtub. After the house was done and everything was completed, we had a garden space in the back that was on the neighbor's property that they said we could use for a while, but they chose to sell and they gave us first option, so we bought 35 more feet for garden space. But we also scored because we had an analysis done, and in the back furthest north corner of the property is our best solar exposure. So within the next 2 years we'll be putting solar panels with a shed underneath them out there in the garden space and the additional land we just were able to purchase.
Thanks for watching, and we really wish you well on your journey toward a more green and beautiful space to live.
And how we live each day is a reflection of our values. How we live each day impacts the world. And you know, it's like one of those old adages of, you know, trying to be the change. And we get to take little steps in that direction through how we live our lives.
Okay, thank you so much, Dennis and Suzanne. And we're gonna have a little Q&A time with them. And Ross Chapin is also here. Thank you for joining us. So if you have any questions about architectural pre-planned homes or that specific home, you can ask Ross. And I see Ross, I don't see Dennis yet. There you guys are, okay.
Awesome. Yeah, folks, feel free to send in questions into the Q&A box. We've got one pretty straightforward question about the square footage of your house.
What's the square footage on our house?
Just under 1,300 square feet. I think it's 1,289 as I recall.
Awesome. And then I also see a question about which side of your home is on the south.
Okay, the front porch is the south-facing part of the house.
There was a part, you could put a clear roof on the porch, but we decided to not do that because it was the south-facing side, so that we would have a more cool porch in the summertime. So that was an important question, actually.
Awesome. Let me see if we've got any more.
And just a little bit about orientation too. With the south facing, the porch is the only significant part of the roof that's south facing, which would be maximum solar. But the trade-off of preserving that beautiful heritage tree meant that part of the year, the front of the house is getting shaded by that big tree, which is why when we bought the additional footage, we have some space that has better sun behind the house in what's now the garden area.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's see. I'll just do a last call for any questions.
And actually, I was wondering if Ross could speak a little bit to people, if anyone is doing a new home plan or has friends or family doing a new home, if you could speak to how people would find these pre-planned homes, if you have any recommendations for them, if they're interested in going that route.
Sure. Am I able to share a screen?
I'm sorry, not right now.
No, okay. Are you able to pull your screen up?
Yeah, if you could, we'll drop it in the chat. We don't have very much time, so.
Okay, that's fine. Well, let me tell you that a lot of I've been working on designing small plans that live large for my entire career. Back in the early days, people would say, well, why? Because you're going to make more money doing the bigger homes. And I just, part of me, it's like, I'm really jazzed by how homes can become fully livable, magic, alive, really feed the soul, feed the family. And then beyond that, I've been working with how small houses come together in small clusters around shared gardens. Pocket neighborhoods is what I'm calling them. Over the years, I had people come to me and they say, gosh, we'd really love to work with you in designing a house. And knowing that they've got a very limited budget and a good house takes literally hundreds of hours to really pull together and refine, I put together some of our best offerings and put them up on our website, which is rosschapin.com website. And on there, you'll see plans. You can see Dennis and Suzanne's plan, as well as many, many dozens more. You can also link to another website for our pocket neighborhoods. The website direct is pocket-neighborhoods.net. We can put that up. But you can also get a link from that. And that's showing how the scale of sociability, not just right-sized homes for people's lives, but how people can come together in proximity with nearby neighbors to find mutual support and to work with the scale of nearby neighbors to do things like shared tools, shared gardens, shared solar, working with shared cars, working with the community aspect, the personal support among each other. If you've got a mom heading out and her kids finally at home resting and, oh my God, she forgot something at the store, she's got a nearby neighbor right there to call on. So many examples, and that's a good resource to go to.
Yeah, and I'll just briefly add that we first met Ross when he was part of developing a what we called co-housing light community that converted in an existing apartment complex to co-housing, and we had the good fortune to live there and be part of such a community. And that's where we bought our first heat pump too, and began to discover some of the steps we could do if we were building from ground up that weren't possible in that kind of a conversion, even though that conversion did lots of solar and a number of the things we've talked about today.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here. And I see a lot's going in the chat. So if there's any more resources, go put them in the chat. And if anyone has other questions, we can answer it that way. I do see a couple more have come in for Ross that maybe you could answer in the chat. So again, thanks Suzanne and Dennis and Ross for joining us. We're going to move into our last presentation. I know there's so much great information today and so many people sharing their experiences. I really appreciate all of you. We're going to hear from Phil Barnhart from the Emerald Valley Electrical Vehicle Association. And I'm going to pull up his slide so he can talk with you about electric cars.
There, now I'm unmuted. I'm Phil Barnhart, president of the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about electrifying your home as it relates to electric cars. Boy, and you've got a whole lot of stuff about me already, don't you?
There we'll go.
There you go.
We'll go on. Okay, there you go.
All
Just
right.
say next slide when you want me to show.
Great, thank you. The Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association is a completely voluntary organization. We don't have any paid staff. Our job is to educate and encourage the adoption of electric vehicles. We're a chapter of the Electric Vehicle Association, which is a worldwide organization chartered in California with about 100 chapters now around the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and all with the idea in mind of educating people about electric cars. How about the next slide? You've got them all at once. Great. There are new types of electric vehicles coming along every day. If you look at this slide, you can see on the far left the Tesla Model S, which has been around since 2012, the white Nissan Leaf, several SUVs, including the upper right blue ID4 from Volkswagen, the pickup truck from Rivian, and there's a bunch of new pickup trucks now. The F-150 Lightning from Ford is being produced now, finally, and it will be, and I'll say more about that later. And then, of course, at the bottom in the middle is the Volkswagen Buzz, which is the electric version of the old hippie van. Next slide. In addition, of course, to the things we think of as cars, are all these other kinds of electric vehicles that are going to be hugely valuable. The electric bicycle on the upper left is a replacement for the ordinary bicycle. I have one, I use it. An old guy like me can climb hills using the electric assist when I wouldn't dare try to ride a regular bicycle any longer. But boy, is it efficient. It's easy to get around. It works really well. Upper right, the Arcimoto, I've got to turn my page here. The Arcimoto Fun Utility Vehicle, and that's built in Eugene, as many of you probably know. You ought to consider it. Take a look at it. They rent them out at their showroom, and they're readily available. You see students buzzing around on their scooters, lower left, and then these other two devices, the names of which I'm blanking on, but I see students at the university using them all the time. Again, very efficient, extremely low cost to operate, and great ways of getting around. The electric bicycle is really good for somebody who would like to ride a bicycle to the office, but doesn't have a shower there to deal with the sweat of the bike ride. My son rides electric bicycle to his office, and because it takes less energy, he can wear a suit and go right into work without having to worry about getting more exercise than he wanted. There are a lot more gadgets coming along, so be aware. Next slide, please. I want to point out this is a really important slide put together by Mark Nystrom, the guru from Lane County, the Lane County government, in which he estimated the local emission sources. And here we're only talking about sources of greenhouse gases that actually are produced locally, not the pollution that may come from somewhere else that is dealt with products that we import, but rather things that are actually done here. We've been talking mostly today about building energy. There's a lot of talk about natural gas and those kinds of things. And you notice that that is the second largest source locally of greenhouse gases. The largest one is transportation energy. About 2/3 of all of the greenhouse gas pollution that originates in Lane County comes from transportation fuels. And then, of course, there are these other things too: waste disposal, industrial processes, and agriculture. Next slide. You can see how important this really is. This is a slide put together, I think, by eWeb that actually shows the carbon emission equivalents based on internal combustion engine, that's ICE vehicles, the normal car, gasoline and diesel vehicles, and then electric vehicles on the right. And that's based on today's production of electricity. As the electric grid gets cleaner, and it will, Oregon is requiring that all electricity sold in Oregon by, I think, 2045 will be clean, non-polluting energy. Currently we get coal-fired power from Wyoming. We get natural gas-fired power from various and sundry other places. In addition, eWeb buys some of its power from these polluting sources, which is why we have some of that. Some of the other electric utilities in the area actually are cleaner than eWeb because they get all of their power from Bonneville, which is mostly hydro. Next slide, please. The benefits of electric vehicles, and some people already mentioned this, are fuel costs and maintenance costs. These fuel costs are based on gasoline costing about $3 a gallon. Well, it's quite a bit higher than that now. So that orange bar, the second bar is actually much higher than that today. It costs about $3 to drive to Portland in my very heavy, very large Tesla. Other people will get to Portland on for less cost than that because their electric vehicles are more efficient. The same thing is true for maintenance. There are somewhere between 500 and 1,500 extra moving parts in a gasoline car as compared to an electric car. The electric motor has basically one moving part and a few bearings in the motor. The gasoline engine, well, most of you know, the gasoline engines have an enormous number of parts, and they're all moving, and they're all heating up and wearing out, and require a lot of energy. So let's move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about the topic of the day, which is home electrification. There are basically two ways that you can electrify your home for charging your electric vehicle. And by the way, charging an electric vehicle is a completely different thing than fueling a gasoline-powered car. If you're used to driving gasoline, you know you get that little gauge on your on the dash, gets down toward the E. You have to think about where you're going to go to refuel. You're going to have to allow half an hour or an hour to go do that. It takes it once a week or once every couple of weeks, maybe more often, that you have to go there and do those things. None of that happens with electric cars if you have a place to charge at home, because you plug in when you get there, you go away and do the other things that you were planning to do. And when you come back, the car is fully charged, or charged at least to the level that you've told it to charge to. Many people, and Betsy told you this earlier in her presentation, many people are doing just fine with what we call a level 1 charger and you call an ordinary plug-in. A 120 volt, 15 amp plug-in will charge a car, a smaller car, at about 6 miles an hour, and a bigger one at about 4 miles an hour. And for most of us who drive 30 miles a day or less, that works fine. You plug it in when you get home in the afternoon, and you unplug it in the morning, and you're fully charged for the next day. If you need it, you can also install a level 2 charger, which you might think of as a dryer plug, 240 volts, and amperage based on the system that you plug in. Most of the time, you want an electric vehicle charging system, EVSE, but sometimes all you need is a plug-in that works for that. And I want to take a couple minutes to talk about electric systems, because we always get these questions about electric charging at home, and people concerned about whether they have adequate capacity in their home to do it. Some older homes will be difficult if you want to try to install a level 2 charger. So if you find yourself needing to charge more than you can get from that standard plug-in, that level 1 charger, you may need to consider what other things you'd like to electrify. If you currently have a gas furnace, a gas stovetop, a gas dryer, a gas water heater, or any of those appliances, you may not have sufficient electrical capacity in your service panel to electrify your ride at a level 2 charger, that 240 volt charger, and do all these other things that you need to do to retrofit. Nobody's talked about that yet, so let me just hit that very briefly. My recommendation is that if you find yourself needing to upgrade your electric panel, do the whole thing at once. It is much less expensive to figure out all the different things you might electrify in your house, and figure out what the capacity needs are that you need a good licensed electrician to help you with, and then upgrade your electric service to meet that capacity, even if you're not planning to do it all at once. Most of the people talking today have said they've done it over time. You can do all the rest of it over time, but do the electric service upgrade all at once. Now, you may have a different situation. My son just recently bought a house that had baseboard heat. Baseboard electric heat is very inefficient. He took it all out. He replaced it with a heat pump. He asked his electrician, well, what do I need to do to make sure I can install electric vehicle charging? The answer was, you've already got very adequate capacity on your panel, because you don't need all that extra electricity to electrify, to use that baseboard heating anymore, because the heat pump is so much more efficient. So you've got plenty on the old panel from 1940 something. to install an electric vehicle charger, a level 2 charger. So you're going to have to look for your own situation and your own specific issues that you have. How far is it from your panel, and so on. I'm not going to go into the details of that, except to suggest that there are many times when you can simply redirect some of the power you already have. Let's suppose you have a dryer plug, a 240 volt dryer plug in or near your garage. You can now get a gadget that plugs into that dryer plug, that you then plug the dryer into, and that you then plug the electric vehicle into. When the dryer is running, the electric vehicle is not charging. When the dryer stops charging, the electric vehicle begins charging again, and voila, no new service capacity needed. You don't add anything to what's coming through your meter or what comes through your service, your electric service. There are other systems like that. You should explore them if you think that that might be beneficial to you. But the main thing that I would recommend when you're dealing with any of these systems is if you're going to have to upgrade your electric supply, do it all at once. Don't try to do it piecemeal. It will be a lot more expensive. Let's go to the next slide. People have talked about utility incentive programs, and I wasn't really prepared to talk about the general ones involving electric vehicles today, but I would like to note that these are among our sponsors: eWeb, Lashley Lane, Central Lincoln, Springfield Utility Board, Lane Electric, and even the city of Ashland, which runs its own power system, the EPUD system as well. These systems all have some kind of a rebate available for the installation of a level 2 charger. I'm not going to try to predict what they are because they change regularly. If you buy your power from any of these systems, I would recommend you go to their webpage, look for electric vehicles, and find out. Some of them will even give you a rebate if you simply tell them that you own an electric vehicle, because they get support from the state of Oregon because of the number of electric cars that are using their system for charging. Now, I wasn't going to talk today about electric vehicle rebates or incentives, but I'll simply mention quickly that for most electric cars, it is possible to get up to a $7,500 federal tax credit if you owe that much in federal taxes to buy a 100% electric car. The state of Oregon offers a rebate of $2,500 on any 100% electric vehicle that costs that has an MSRP of less than $50,000. And so that's something to consider. That's 5% of that $50,000 right there. They also offer what's called a charge ahead rebate for low income people up to $5,000, and that includes used vehicles as well. The only limitation is that, again, that $50,000 limit, and that your income is below a certain level. Now, it's not particularly low level. In Lane County right now, it's about $70,000 for a family of 4. So you ought to be looking into those things. In some cases, the dealers will actually collect that rebate from the state for you and reduce your price by that amount. And one final hint on rebates: if you don't pay $7,500 in federal taxes and you're interested in leasing your car, make sure that the lease company takes the federal tax rebate as a part of their purchase of the car, and that they pass through that rebate in what you pay them on a monthly basis for doing that. We've already seen the question of what the company is called that does the dryer plug adaptation. It's called SplitVolt, SplitVolt.com. You can go there, look at their website. Right now, they're having a sale. If you happen to be in that situation you ought to look into it and see whether they can be helpful. Finally, there was a lot of comments earlier about batteries. And we got a great explanation about the installation of batteries and how to use them with solar panels and so forth. Let me make one final observation about that. The new F-150 Ford pickup Lightning will come automatically with a vehicle to home capacity. If you buy the electric vehicle service equipment recommended by Ford for the purpose of this gadget and have it installed correctly by an electrician who actually understands how to do it, you will be able to use the battery in your pickup truck to back up your house in the event of a power failure. I expect there will be other vehicles that have that service available. And let's talk about this a little bit, because that truck has a very substantial sized battery. I forget what it is. It's something in the neighborhood of 100 kilowatt hours. Very big battery compared to these small land-based ones that were discussed earlier. And so it might power your house for several days. And then when you need to, you still have enough range, unplug, leave the house dark for an hour, drive to the DC fast charger that's still working down the road, plug your pickup truck in, charge it up again, and then drive back home and repeat the process. I expect there'll be a lot more vehicles like that. I do expect the Cybertruck from Tesla will have that capacity when it ever comes out. I think I'm ready for the next slide. Those of you, actually, there's one more slide, which apparently you didn't get. Let me tell you about it. The next, this backup one, if you would, if you can do that. The next slide that I thought I had sent you, and maybe I didn't, was an invitation for those who would like to know more about electric vehicles to come to our meeting next Tuesday evening, June 7th, at 7 o'clock in the evening, where you will get a much longer presentation and include a lot more about electric vehicles themselves, which we haven't done today because of the lack of time. And you would go to revuporegon.org, I'll put it in the chat, in order to register for that event. You will get, I'm the second string presenter today. You'll get the first string presenter for that meeting, who does a much better job than I can, to talk about the electric cars in more detail, and not with a focus on electrifying your house, but with a focus on actually using an electric car for all of your needs. Thank you. Laura, great presentation, by the way. It was very well done. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much. That was excellent. And people have resources. Of course, 15 minutes is very short for these topics, I know, which is why this is just a start, and the resources will take you to more in-depth information. So we have about 10 minutes left for our day. And so I wanted to start with a few questions for Phil, and then anybody for the rest of the time we have. So if any other questions came up.
Yeah, I see one from Betsy about, do you know where to get the device to charge off the electric dryer outlet?
Right, and I answered that one. It's called, Split Volt. Let's get, yes, SPLITVOLT.com. They have a number of different ones. You'd want to match up your dryer plug with the one that fits for you, and it would do the job. If your dryer's in the garage or near there, this would be a great way of doing it, especially if your service capacity is short, because it requires no additional capacity from your electric utility.
Awesome. I think that answers a couple questions in the chat. Let's see. There was a quick question that was, oh, I lost it in here, about electric, if you know any electric vans available now that might be suitable for camping?
Boy, that's a really great question. There are a number of ones that are being that they have advertised, but they're not actually built yet. And my recommendation is you go to sites like Plugstar, PLUGSTAR.com, and put in your zip code, and it will tell you what electric or hybrid vehicles are available in the area. By the way, I don't recommend anybody buy a hybrid vehicle. One of these days, we're going to have to stop using gasoline and diesel altogether. When that happens, your hybrid vehicle will be as useful as the size of the electric range, which these days is somewhere between 18 and 50 miles. So go full electric. I'll cheat a little and anticipate on the Tuesday's meeting by saying there are lots of electric vehicle chargers out and about now, and there will be a lot more as Peter DeFazio and Uncle Joe's infrastructure bill actually goes into effect.
Awesome. And then I think a last question specifically for you, Phil. We've got some folks up in Washington. Are you aware of similar organizations to Rev Up Oregon in Washington?
They are welcome to come to our event on Tuesday. It's a Zoom meeting. You don't have to drive anywhere. It's free. Rev Up Oregon is a name we chose because some portion of our talk may be Oregon specific. But there are pretty easy ways to deal with the Washington Department of Transportation. I think it's called WDOT, that would get you more information about Washington rebates and credits.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Phil. I think those were all the questions for this presentation, and then we can move on. I'll throw it back to Laura to talk about anything else.
Yeah, if people have any follow-up things, any resources that you missed that didn't make it in the chat, we can take a minute or two to get more things in the chat. And I want to just thank everybody. This really was a community effort. As you saw, there were a lot of homes, a lot of homeowners and professionals and community volunteers and interpreters, just so many people involved to make this happen. So I really appreciate all of you and thank you for making this effort. And the videos are going to be there. So they'll be a great resource for sharing about what community members in Eugene area are doing. So we can share those with friends and family. So I'm going to just stop there and see if there's any other resources or any other questions that you guys want to get before we end today. Best places to buy EVs. Is that possible to answer in the chat? And I think the electric vehicle associations can help with that. Okay, well, thanks again, everybody, for making this event happen. I hope you all have a nice rest of your Saturday. Bye.